Hello and welcome to the WCA Europe Open Qualifiers, where we've had 512 players play through a giant bracket to get to where they are today, and we have 8 left. So we'll be going through those games today. Joining me on the cast is none other than Raven. How's it going, man?
Yeah, it's going really well. I'm really excited to see these guys play. I mean, they fought through a huge bracket to get here, and now it's the final hurdle. There's 8 of them left. It's single limb, and the top 3 go to China, which is huge.
There's a lot on the line as well, not just China, but there's also a lot of prize money. You have $12,500 worth of prize money going to be spread out through these players. First place taking $8,000, second place taking $3,000, and third place taking $1,500. So not only just China to play for, but there's also a lot of money on the line as well. So we're going to have a bracket as well for you to see. We're going to have 4 games this evening at the start of the bracket, and then tomorrow we'll have the semi-finals, the grand finals, and the third place match. So to start off the day, we have Crane versus Hallmark, Born to Win versus Millennium's Alex following up, and then later on we have Full Remote versus Camlin, and Duedo versus Gara. So a lot of up-and-coming players in this bracket.
Yeah, definitely. I think you've got to look at Crane and Gara as the 2 favourites to take it. But all these guys, like I said before, has fought through a huge bracket with a lot of top players in, and they've made it. So, you know, these guys have a lot to prove and everything to gain, really. If these guys can either take down, for example, the Hallmark versus Crane. If Hallmark beats Crane, to take down someone like Crane is pretty impressive. And then again, the same for Gara's opponent to beat them, and then to continue on and get one of those top 3 spots is going to be huge for these lesser known players.
You know, these lesser known players had to fight, like you say, for a lot of good players to get here. SK Gaming had a strong run in as well, bringing Spo and AK Wonder. Navi had a show in, Dignitas. They took out all these guys to get to here today. So this is kind of make or break for their careers. They get opportunity to go to China with 3 qualified players that we had a few months ago. So we have Life Coach, Stan Sifka, and Kalento, who already qualified for this event. So they have an opportunity to go to China with them and kind of make their name in Hearthstone.
Yeah, I mean, again, for the newer guys or the lesser known guys, there's everything to gain, like 100%. If you do well in this tournament, go to China and do well again. If these guys want to take their careers further in terms of professional Hearthstone, the chances of being picked up by a team and everything that comes with that jumps up dramatically. But again, for say Crane and Gara, the 2 names, the biggest names there, you know, these guys play the game professionally. They want to win the tournaments, and that's why they're here, and they'll definitely have a focus. And you know, we'll see whether experience wins out, or maybe playing against players who, you know, a lot of more known players sort of played something a little bit different in their decks, and it's really hard to play around actually, because you know, even just a couple of cards that you don't normally see in matches are really tough, because normally you see games where you could probably name 28, 29 of the cards at least on certain matchups, but it'd be really difficult. Someone throw a bit of a curveball in there.
Well, you say that. I've had a quick browse through some of the lists these players have submitted, and there are a couple of curveballs in there, so hopefully we'll be seeing them in the games coming up. And speaking of kind of like the top tier players in this bracket, Gara and Crane. Gara actually had an opportunity to qualify through the Pro Qualifier, which was a couple of months ago, but he unfortunately didn't make it. So this is round 2 for him. This is his second opportunity to go to China. And Tempo Storm did have a shown in China this year. I think they took Dog with them as well. So yeah, it'd be for him to return there as well. So Gara definitely looking for that opportunity.
Yeah, and I think coming back, it's not often you get 2 chances in a tournament this big and this important. Again, even just the fact that it'll be held over in China, it's even the traveling and everything. It's a huge tournament for Garrett to go, you know, give a second try at it. He's got to be focused and really wants to take it this time, as he sort of unfortunately missed his opportunity the first time round. So be interested to see what decks he's get play. You know, I've not actually looked at the deck list too much, but we know Gara does like his Shaman as well, which again sort of deemed the lesser classic. Even after the expansion, when we saw the cards, it was like, these are insane. Totem Golem, Tuskar Totemic, like this is going to like just boost Shaman up into, say, you know, your tier list you see online, and it just hasn't really come out, has it?
He may be Gara best Shaman, but Shaman is absent from his lineup today. But enough about Gara. We'll be seeing a little bit later. Coming up, we have Crane versus Hallmark. Now, Crane is actually our teammate. Both me and Raven are on London Conspiracy, and he's one of the guys who plays with us. And he's had like an accelerated career. You know, he did very well. Well, he qualified for Via Game. You know, he's been practicing with RDU, Life Coach. You know, he's got some good practice partners, and he fell short when it came to the BlizzCon qualifier. He did get quite far in that tournament. So this will be a good opportunity for him to kind of say, I am a good player. You should notice me. Start inviting me to stuff. So, Crane.
Yeah, and the fact that something that, again, we had talked about Crane, but he's probably the player here we know the best, is that he's a monster on ladder. Like, he is so consistent. Like, you see, 1-2 days in ladder, he's already legend, and then he's fighting for, top 20. I think he's been, top 20, most seasons, or in and around that anyway, which is really impressive to do on a consistent level. It's actually, at the end of a season when everyone's fighting for those top spots, and maybe not so much now, but previously while the BlizzCon points were hyper important to everyone, to be able to consistently finish like that on ladder is huge. He is a beast. And but Hallmark, like I said, he fought his way through this set. He got all the way here, and one of the harder opponents he could have got, so he maybe drew one of the shorter straws in the in the tournament there. But he's got everything to prove. That's the way I would look at it if I was him. If I was the lesser known player coming in against sort of one of the big guns, I'd be like, well, definitely want to win, but if you lose to Crane. A lot of people lose to Crane, but if I win, then suddenly he's got a big name to just see, I'd beat that guy in a really important tournament.
Yeah, beating these big players when it matters is good, not only for your confidence, but also for kind of your CV, I guess, as a Hearthstone player. And we don't really know much about Hallmark. I mean, some of these players, Fallen Remote is a player who's going to be playing later. We know him because he used to actually enter some of our events, so we only know him from that, whereas some of the other players we don't have a lot of information on. Hallmark, on the other hand, what I can tell you about him, he likes his druids, he likes his hunter, and he likes his mage, so they're the classes he will be bringing. Crane is someone we know a lot more about because obviously he's on our team, and we've played with him, we've watched him play, we've spoken to him. And one thing Crane was really known for is Patron, which is the big controversy of kind of Hearthstone at the moment, the Patron nerfs and such. So it looks like Hallmark's got some stuff going on, and we'll be having the match coming up soon. So we're just let's go for the decks, I guess. Let's see what these guys have brought. So Crane has brought Druid, Mage, and Warrior. Okay, let's talk about the Warrior to start with. Crane and Warrior.
Yeah, so obviously Crane has been one of those patron players, the likes of, say, Life Coach, for example. These guys have really, and Sixo, sat down with the deck in its previous incarnation and learnt that deck, played thousands of games. And, we've, anyone who plays Hearthstone in the past few months has seen the power of this deck, but with the recent Warsong nerf that has effectively removed that card from the game, at least in terms of the patron deck, it's interesting to see some of the other versions of it that have come up recently. We saw Sixo did well in a previous tournament this past weekend with a patron deck that didn't have Warsongs in, and he won it, because patron's still difficult to actually deal with. If you get the typical turn 5 patron, build up the board of say 2 to 3 patrons to 4, it's still hard to remove, right? You still gain that amazing board control. Warrior is known for its removal as well, so all the Execute and Whirlwinds for the aggro, and we've seen an uprising of Secret Paladin that plays a lot of low health minions. I think it's still a good deck. It's got a lot going for it.
There's a big question kind of put on a Ukrainian Star Ladder event recently, and it was, will Patron survive the nerf? Because the nerf hadn't come at that point, and I was interviewed and they asked me, do you think Patron's going to live on after the nerf? But Surrender that day had hit rank 5 legend with Patron without Warsongs. Even though the nerf hadn't happened, he still played Patron and tried it out. And he played a very different version to the one Sixo was piloting at the HS Arena. He was running Sludge Belchers and stuff like that, whereas Sixo kind of stuck to the traditional Patron list, but kind of cycled it. You have to take the Warsongs out. He put in Dr. Boom. He put in Grom, and they were 2 old inclusions in the Patron deck. So Patron's still alive. People still believe it's good enough. And Tyze is actually piloting it as well at the BlizzCon Championship. So there's still a lot of top players who believe that Patron is still
and I think as well, it's the same you go through with in terms of the meta shift and deck archetypes. I think there's still a lot more to go for this new version of Patron Warrior. I think there's at the moment, again, we saw, like you said, Sludge Belchers in one version, Dread Corsairs and Grom and Dr. Boom in other versions. This is just a week or so after the nerf. Sorry, so I think give it another month, the deck could look very, very different.
Yeah, Patron evolved a lot during its time before the nerf. Another class which picked up a lot of popularity due to Patron was Druid, and this is also in response to the handlocks that became very popular once Patron became kind of like the king of decks, really, I guess. So, but Patron was considered to be countered by handlock, and that wasn't always the case. So Druid started to come around as well, and Druid generally did pretty well against Patron, and it did well against handlock. But Druid's been going through some interesting changes itself recently. Mid-range Druid, very traditional deck, but we've had the Fel Reaver variants coming around.
My favourite version. It's so good. It's just a hyper-aggressive Druid that I think it tops out at Boom normally, but it does play Fel Reaver as the two, the two big guys. And it's really interesting just because Druid's not really... There's been some aggro versions like Mech Druid, for example, but in a roundabout way, Druid's been very stagnant in terms of the style of play that class uses. But now that we see a more aggro version, it changes everything. So when there's more than one popular archetype for a class, it really changes your mulligans, for example, when you come up against it. Like, what are you even playing against? Because your mulligans for a hyper aggro deck versus a mid-range deck are very different in a lot of cases.
Another thing to consider about, like you said, the mulligans, a Druid has always had kind of the same kind of lineup, right? Mid-range Druid has been super powerful. We had Ramp kind of like bounce in and out of the meta game, but it was never as consistent as mid-range Druid. So whenever you came against a Druid, you kind of knew what you needed to mulligan for. I mean, Aspirant kind of changed things a lot, so Quick Shot became good, Dart Bomb and stuff, just to deal with the Aspirants. But much like Warlock, which has the advantage of kind of surprise, like Warlock has a lot of archetypes which are viable, so it's hard to mulligan. Now that Druid has a new archetype altogether, an aggressive lineup, you may have to consider your mulligans again. So it's definitely something that brings an advantage to the class if it has multiple archetypes that are viable.
Yeah, because it actually, even to a certain extent, makes mid-range Druid a bit better, because it's still the same deck that everyone's been playing, more or less, but knowing your opponent has to now think about this on a new level in terms of mulligan and even overall strategy. And even if aggro Druid became really popular, then people might bring different decks that then mid-range Druid is better against. So it really does have quite a big impact on it.
Another deck that both players are using, well, another class both players are using is Mage. Now, Mage is another class that has multiple archetypes. Freeze Mage, Tempo Mage, Echoes Mage, even to some extent. I mean, Neville's is a big fan of that deck, and he does very well on ladder with it. And so there's a lot of different Mage decks which are viable, and especially when Patron fell off, Freeze Mage definitely came in the counter like Paladins and kind of like the decks that rely on board control.
Yeah.
So Mage as a class, both the lineups are... both these players are going to have it in their lineup, so it'll be interesting to see what those guys bring. But we're actually going to go to a quick break. We've been having some issues with Blizzard. Their servers have been a bit shaky, but hopefully we'll be back very soon with some matches. So don't go anywhere, stick around, and we'll hopefully be back with some more Hearthstone.